All right, everyone, welcome to the Oklahoma Kansas postgame show. I know everybody's head probably hanging a little low as the Sooners fall 38-33 to the Jayhawks there in Lawrence. And what was a game of just physicality and grit. You know, sometimes in the game of football, you get conditions like that. And it really just comes down to who the tougher team is. You know, what team has a better offensive line, what team can hold on to the football longer, what team can move the opposing team off the line of scrimmage. And I thought from the very beginning of the game, the Jayhawks really proved that they were stronger on that side of the football, relying on their run game to really be the focal point of their entire offense for 4 quarters of football. It was really, as a former offensive lineman, a beautiful thing to watch. You know, you can talk about creativity and Levy and the Oklahoma offense and all the things that they've accomplished and done this year, and how high flying that offense can be. But this game, in conditions of it's 35 degrees, it's pouring down rain, the ball is consistently wet, it's difficult to throw it, it's difficult to catch it. So you just got to play the way that the conditions have dictated. And Kansas was just better at doing that, right? They were just better at doing it for 4 quarters. Even with the mistakes that they made, they still found a way to overcome and found a way to get it done for the first time in some 20 odd years. So you got to give it up to the Jayhawks for the way they went up there and competed. I said this last week when I was talking about UCF, and I'll say it again. It's the Oklahoma Sooners. Every single time they take the field, the team that they are playing, it's like their Super Bowl. They absolutely want to win it. They absolutely want to play their best. So you're going to get their best punch every single time. And that's exactly what they got from Kansas today. I thought there were some good performances from the Sooners. I thought Ethan Downs went out there and led that defense well. It was unfortunate to see Danny Stutzman go down, and obviously I think they would have had a little more success defensively in the second half if he was able to be out there as the vocal and leader of that team, playmaker defensively for that group, not having him really hurt Oklahoma in the second half of that game. I thought they were opportunistic defensively. I thought they played about as well as they could as far as the scheme is concerned, but Kansas was just brutal up front. And when it came down to having some patient backs in the backfield, so Jayhawks allowed that offensive line to get out there and go to work, and Oklahoma just didn't have the ability to stop them at times. That's a beautiful game that was played by Kansas along that offensive line. Probably the best performance they've had up front in a very, very long time. So tough game. Obviously, the Sooners had a lot of hopes. So as far as semifinals are concerned, I think that's probably still on the table. They're going to need a little help. That would be running the table, winning a Big 12 championship, obviously, and hoping that someone falls at the top. So I don't know that all their dreams are crushed at this point, but definitely going to be more difficult when you lose to an. I think Kansas is unranked, right? Were they 5-2 and unranked this season? That's going to hurt. So frustrating for sure. I thought Dylan Gabriel wasn't a perfect game. Somebody told me. I mentioned him coming through big on that final touchdown, because I think he answers the call when his team needs him. And someone said, pump your brakes. He hasn't played that well. And, I like once again, that's coming from somebody who's probably never stepped a foot on a football field before. When it's wet and cold, it's not easy to throw the football, and I thought the Kansas secondary did a pretty decent job locking up the Sooners receivers at times. And I thought there were mistakes on that end. You're talking about probably the first game where I noticed that routes weren't as crisp. I thought guys at times looked like they were a little, I don't want to say not giving their best effort, but they looked a little sluggish, like the conditions maybe were weighing them down a little bit. And I think it was difficult for Gabriel to get the ball out of his hand and get it to those guys. So I thought when he needed to be great on the ground, he was. At one point, he was really the only rushing game for the Sooners early in that game. I think we've learned, in my opinion, Tyree Walker, when he's healthy, I don't know what happened to him late in the game, but that dude is the truth. Walk on or not, you got to give him the damn ball and let that kid eat, period. He is the undisputed leader in that running back room, in my opinion, and adds confidence to an offensive line that is needing it. They need that confidence when they take the field. So to me, if Walker is able to go, he needs to get the ball 20, 25 times a game, and I think that offense will be better for it. Disappointed in Jeff Levy a little bit today. As a former offensive lineman, I love coordinators that come from the line of scrimmage because it's easier for them to see the game from the LOS back, right? And with the conditions being what they were, I thought he would have been able to call a better game, especially once Walker started getting hot. It's, at one point, you just give it to him every darn time you can. And I thought that he struggled doing that at times. And then we have to acknowledge that, Ethan Downs gets a turnover and it's like, put this sucker away, go out and win the game, right? Go and win the game. Call plays that are game winning plays. And then you just get three straight runs with the back that was not the guy that was having success, right? Barnes was not having the success that Walker was early in the game. And it just seemed like at that point, I get wanting to run the clock, but it just seems like they were out there playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And they got themselves in position. Kansas gets the ball back, and next thing they make a bunch of plays at home, right? Led by a 6-year senior who's out there trying to this is a historic win for Kansas. He's out there trying to make history, and they find a way to get it done. I thought Oklahoma lost this game at the end. I really do. Like, I'll give it up to Kansas for playing extremely well, playing physical and answering the call. There's no doubt they showed up and put their foot down at home. But Oklahoma at the end of that game, made by, Ethan Downs, gives them a shot to close it out, go out there and be great and win that game. And I thought Jeff Lebby let down that offense. This, to me, in my opinion, probably the worst game that he's called so far this season. I know there were some early games where Sooner fans were frustrated and upset with the way that he approached it. I thought there was so much going on up front of the offensive line that maybe he got a little bit of a pass early in the season. I thought in this game, there were many plays that were called that I was just head scratchers. Like, what are you out there? What are you thinking? What are you doing? It just wasn't what the team needed. And I thought that final drive there really was kind of the nail in the coffin when you look back at the ability to go out there and win that game. Now, it's no guarantee that if he throws it twice in that game that they're going to find a way to do it. I mean, you saw how difficult it was to throw the ball, and Kansas was getting to the passer. Even that last drive, when they throw that 40-yard bomb and, they're within 23 yards striking distance, and they're hitting home with 3-man rushes. Like, that offensive line got their butts beat today by a Kansas Jayhawk defensive front that ends up winning that battle. That's frustrating. But we knew coming into this game that the OU offensive line wasn't perfect. We knew coming into this game that they had struggled, and a lot of it was things that I felt like were correctable, but it reared its ugly head again today, right? You're talking about communication. These guys aren't talking to each other, right? They're not talking to each other. Which linebacker are you blocking on this play? Point him out, call the number, make sure you're sure when you come off the line of scrimmage who's doing what. I thought there was some confusion again today with some of those things. Also, pre-snap reads, and a lot of it is because they got a redshirt freshman and a freshman out there, and I'll give those kids some credit. The Sexton boy, let me tell you something. Deer Creek's the kid from Deer Creek, Sexton, is going to be a player. He is raw, but he is ruthless, right? He is a physical, nasty, high energy, high motor player. Wants to run the football, wants to get knockdowns. I love the fact that he got the experience today. I think he's going to be one of those first round type guys for Oklahoma here in a few years. Reminds me so much of a young Wes Sims out there just playing bully ball. Period. Technique is mid, but when he gets his hands on you, he is absolutely going to beat you up and be physical for 4 quarters. So I love watching him get out there and compete. So some of this is, you go from a freshman to a sophomore to a junior. Well, all of a sudden, as a junior, you start to get mentally weaponized, right? You walk up to the line of scrimmage and you got a 3 technique in front of you as a guard, and the defensive end is on the outside eye of the tackle, but you notice something a little different, right? The 3 technique is off the ball. It could be 6 inches in his stance, and you notice it. What do? You yell, game, game, game. You let that tackle know something's not right, right? These kids aren't lined up where they should be at this point. And if it happens, right, all of a sudden that in pinches and that 3 technique loops around the outside, well, you've prepared yourself for that because in your pre-snap read, you've understood that something was just a little bit off with their alignment. That happened several times in this game where these kids they're walking up to the line of scrimmage. I'm thinking it from watching it on television. Watch the game. There's no communication. The game happens in front of them, and someone misses it, right? They slip up. If you can see it before, well, obviously it's way easier to react to it if you have an idea what's coming. And look, there's some of those cases where the 3 technique was just being lazy and he just lined up a little further off the line of scrimmage than he normally does, and nothing happens. But the alert alerts that tackle that, hey, something might happen here. And now all of a sudden his footsteps are better, his hands are wider, his eyes are open, and he's seeing it play out in front of him. They missed a couple of those today. That will get better as they get older. This line is a work in progress. There's no doubt about it. But I promise you, I think this group here in a year, is going to be pretty darn good. It's unfortunate that they just can't get to that level this season. I think what they are today is probably what they're going to be for the remainder of the season. Like I've really been holding on, trying not to say that in these post games and preparing each week for another OU game. But I think they are just kind of what they are. They're going to have good moments. They're going to have bad moments. I think with Tyree Walker in the backfield, he weaponizes that group. They feel great with him back there. They play with confidence with him back there. I hope that they can get him the ball as much as possible moving forward. I'm trying to think anything else that really sticks out to me. You got every once in a while you just have to give it up to the opposing team. I thought Kansas went out there and played about as good as they could get it done. They deserved to win this game. They really did. They found a way to get it done at the end. All right, let's take some questions here. I really appreciate you guys joining me. I know that was a tough one, and no one wants to even look at a screen moving forward for the rest of the day. Ben Richards, worst game Levy's called since the Wildcat debauchery that occurred last year. I don't know that I disagree with you. It was pretty bad. Don't know why Tyree Walker wasn't in at the end. I think he's nicked up. I think he was hurt at the end of the third quarter there, and they just couldn't put him back in the game. Downs and IT should have won that game for the Sooners. I agree 100%. I wonder if that's the Jason White. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. It was shocking to see them flounder the way that they did in that next drive. I just didn't see that coming. It's almost like everybody relaxed a little bit in that moment, right? It ended and everybody, that interception happened. It was like, oh, that release, he did it. But there's still so much football to be played. It's like they weren't aware of the moment. Dusty, Sam Mays is a Sooner fan. You were one of my favorite all-time college football players because you were nasty. Why doesn't a program like OU have that nastiness? Man, they do. I think the Sexton kid is going to be filthy one day. Real felon football. I think the Green kid also. Green gets called for the worst damn holding penalty. I literally sat up it was mind-blowing. The worst holding penalty I've ever seen in my entire life. He basically choke slams a kid in the hole. It was filthy, incredible block. Loved every second of it. And gets called for holding. He got called for holding because the referee was shocked at how bad he whooped that kid's ass. That's what it came down to. It was a miserable call. Second, the other call that was terrible. The targeting call on the goal line. I don't understand what's happened to football. What is a defender supposed to do on the 1 yard line? I don't care who has the football, quarterback, running back, receiver. That kid is running all in towards a line of scrimmage. You have no choice but to put your body on his to prevent him from getting in the line of scrimmage. I don't even think the Beam was trying to slide. I think he slipped, landed horizontally on his hip, and could have, right? And that ball could have got over the line of scrimmage. I thought the defender did everything in his power to prevent that from happening, which is what he should have done. So now you're telling me this is a garbage targeting call. He's going to miss the first half of Bedlam next week. That's trash. It is a trash call. And I wish these things could be reviewed after the game. Maybe they can. I wish that someone could look at that and someone tell me how that could have been any different. Oh, you're just supposed to back off and let him get into the end zone? Is that what you're supposed to do? Pathetic. It was a pathetic call. Should have never happened. KC fan. I kept saying everyone was sleeping on Kansas this game. Oklahoma needed to play really well to win, but dumb penalties and turnovers aren't beating a good team like Kansas. Yeah, I don't know that I definitely wasn't sleeping on Kansas. In my pregame prediction, I said that they were good enough to make this exciting, for sure. And then you elevate it immediately. You take a good football team, right, or a decent football team, and you tell them they're playing Oklahoma, well, all of a sudden they're a good football team. Right, Kansas got a couple of losses that they shouldn't have based off of what I saw them do today. Behind that offensive line, if their starter is healthy this season, Kansas is probably undefeated. Like that's how good that football team's offensive line is and that run game is. They just didn't have the passing game early in the season. Beans getting comfortable, throwing the ball down the field. They're out there making plays. Kansas is not, I'm not, and I'm sure I'll get some Oklahoma State fan here in a second. Tell me, oh, you're just hyping OU up. Oh, Kansas is supposed to be a good football. Kansas is a good football team. They just are. I don't know why anybody would have slept on them, especially they're on the road. The O line is not good enough to win a championship. Oklahoma drill. I would agree to that. They're not good enough to win a national championship, but they're good enough to win a Big 12 championship. I mean, that's still very much on the table for OU. And I don't know that they're good enough to win a semifinal game either. Depending on who they play, that matchup could get real interesting, especially if they play against a more veteran defensive line. Somebody with some size and quickness would really cause that group some issues up front. The offensive lines are tough, man. It's tough to find them, tough to get them, tough to coach them. You're talking about everybody. Look at Alabama right now. Like the Crimson Tide's biggest issue is what? They don't have an offensive line for the first time in 15 years. Their offensive line in Alabama is average or sometimes below average. I mean, this is a pandemic around football and in general. J.R. Conrad and I, if you guys haven't watched this podcast, you can leave this live after we're done and check out the J.R. Conrad podcast. We talked about just the offensive line mentality and how much it's changed in the last 20 years and how difficult it is to coach these kids because now they're showing up to college with all this technique and knowledge of how to pass protect and all those things, but they don't know about the fight yet, right? Because they've been in 2-point stances, they haven't been in 3-point stances, they haven't been in offenses that run the football consistently. I didn't know anything about pass protection when I got to Oklahoma State, but what I did know is how to play football in a phone booth, and my job was just to stick my foot up the other guy's ass. Period. My coach taught me how to kick ass in high school, and so when I got to college, it was about, well, okay, so you have all that ability, right? You know how to fight, but can you do it correctly? Can you do it with poise? Can you do it with grace? Can you do it with technique? And I learned that stuff as an older player. It's hard to teach a kid at 18, 19, 20 how to fight. You need to learn that at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. When you're in your pee-wee middle school, high school days, that's when you learn how to fight. So offensive line play around the country, I mean, you're seeing it everywhere you look. Big 10, SEC, Big 12, Pac-10, all everywhere. There are struggles to find good offensive linemen, and to find 5 of them, right, that gel is even more difficult. So Oklahoma is not on their own as far as offensive lines that are struggling this year. That whole targeting play was weird. Bean sliding made no sense. And that targeting they called was too great for me. I don't think the kid was sliding. I think he slipped. And I think the Oklahoma player I think it was a travesty that they called targeting on him. I trust Beatonbow as a developer, Dusty Malone. I trust Beatonbow as a developer, but man, that really seems like what is hurting OU this year. It is. It is. And there was questions early in the season about how good that group could be. And I think the base of this group that he's got is pretty damn good. And I think that they will figure it out here, throughout the rest of this year and going into next. Like I think Oklahoma's in a pretty good spot offensive line wise moving into the SEC next year, right? Big picture, talking about big picture. I think he's got himself a group that will be physical and nasty and be what he needs in the be over the next couple of seasons. The coach's coach scared, which lost this game. You got the ball there at their 40 and you don't go for the first down, which would win the game. Yeah, I thought that was strange. And look, they on the 4th and 7, Gabriel's in the game, right? They're going to go for it on 4th and 7. It's clearly going to be a pass, has to be. And you get a receiver false start, which as an offensive lineman, I'll never understand it. I'm like, as a receiver, you can't hear the damn snap anyway. So where are you going? Like, even on a quiet day at home, you're not hearing a snap count. You're waiting for the ball to move most of the time. So on the road in those conditions, wind blowing, how are you out there false starting? That was a terrible mistake by that kid. I mean, bad, very bad. One loss to an unranked team this late in the season leaves very little chance of making the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Jeff. I think they're definitely going to need some help. But if you run the table, Oklahoma State's success here lately, if they win tonight, should get them in the ranked conversation. That's another ranked opponent for Oklahoma to beat there if they can run the table. It's their rival on the road. That's a good look. You win a Big 12 championship against who knows who it would be. Is it a Texas or whoever it would be? You hope that they're ranked relatively high. I mean, the resume, they have to sit and wait, and see for sure. But I don't think it's completely off the table. We were never a playoff team this year anyway. The season is about taking steps to get bigger and better for the SEC. I do believe Oklahoma still win the Big 12, but we got to be better. Yeah, I agree 100% with you, KC fan. I don't think I came into the season believing that Oklahoma was an SEC or a semifinal team either. I can honestly tell you throughout the season so far, I've been overly impressed with the way that they've got out there and competed. I thought there was going to be, I think Gabriel has leveled up tenfold from what I thought he was going to be this year. I think that defense, what they've done and accomplished, has been, I mean, almost magical to see them take the steps that they had this year. Outside of an offensive line, that's you probably have to give just a hard C or a C minus. I think that's the group. If that group was a B, right, B plus, we're talking about Big 12 champions and a chance to absolutely win a semifinal game. And that's how close they are. I know OU fans hate hearing that because Lincoln Riley said it so many times while he was in Norman, but I do think this team is very close to being pretty damn good. That defense is opportunistic. They understand the defense. They understand where they're supposed to be. They force turnovers in Norman. It's not a lucky thing. They're in the right place at the right time because the defense put them there. Those kids trusted. They trust Venables. I think he's out there getting a better understanding of what they're capable of every single time they take the field. If they had more support from the offense, that defense would even have bigger teeth. I mean, they're pretty damn good. Yeah, I mean, I think they've exceeded, even with this loss to Kansas. Oklahoma has exceeded expectations going into this season. And if you're an OU fan, I think you've got to be pretty pleased with what your head coach has accomplished so far in the position that he's put this football team in going into next season. Chris Lieberman, what do we need most head into the SEC? Pretty easy for me. Improved offensive line play. And if you can go find yourself some cornbread eating, you know, 6 foot, 340-pound defensive tackles to sit in the middle, that would be helpful. I'm just letting you know, like that game is won in the South, in the trenches, in the middle. And I think the more they can stop the run between this A and C gaps, the better for this Oklahoma defense. So, but I think there's very little to, like, I'm not looking at this group and thinking, wow, they just don't have anything at this position that is going to be helpful in the SEC. I think across the board, offensively and defensively, they've got guys that are ready to take the jump. I think getting Schmitty back in the strength and conditioning situation has helped tremendously. They're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. You can already tell that their bodies have changed significantly. Give Kanik another year with Schmitty, right? Give those guys another season of preparing themselves for it, and I think they'll be there. Recruiting wise, though, yeah, you got to focus on that line has got to get big and bad on both sides of the ball, and I think that would probably be where I would focus the most. But I think there's speed on this team. I think there's quickness on this team. I think there's explosiveness on this team. I think Jackson Arnold is a special player sitting behind Dylan Gabriel. I think someone that's going to have a hell of a career. Good to see him to be able to sit in red shirt and learn from I think Dylan Gabriel is a student of the game. I think being in the meeting room with Gabriel is going to be helpful to Arnold. I think that kid is going to be exactly what Oklahoma needs moving forward. And then Gabriel's got another year, which I don't know that he'll necessarily take it. If I had to guess, he probably won't. But I think that they're in a pretty good spot. Jedediah Jackson, I am not impressed with the offensive play calling. He seems to not lean on people the way an elite school should. Too much trickery instead of hitting them in the mouth. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the reverses and all that stuff either. I think it looks cool in practice and it's fun to throw out there in a scrimmage every once in a while. But, in a game like that, when every yard matters so much, when the conditions are what they are, where the balls hit the ground several times as far as fumbles and things like that. Like, it's just an unnecessary risk. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems foolish to even put your team in that position. You're going to run a reverse, and you're going to, guys that don't typically hand off the ball to each other, you're going to trust them when the ball is wet and it's 30 something degrees. Like, it just seemed like a lunatic play to call. Like, understand the trickery in those situations for sure. Just line up and go get it, especially when you're running back to when Walker was playing as well as he was. I'm right there with you, Jed. You would think on the last play of the game, Gibson and Anderson with their height would have been on the field and thrown to. They weren't on the field in that last play? Hmm, I didn't know that. That is strange considering they're just giants. Um, I don't understand why Gabriel never lines up behind the center. It's like Levy has never heard of an I formation. Man, that's just college football in general. Very few kids. I mean, there's conversations every year in the NFL draft about quarterbacks that have never taken snaps under center. I mean, never. What does that even mean? I can't wrap my head around it, right? That's like going back to once again what I said about the offensive line play. You'll learn a certain type of way to do it in high school, right? And then you develop as you get older and you learn more as you get into college. And everybody in high school was taking the snaps under center when I was playing football. Like that was something that's how you learn to do it, right? As a kid. The shotgun snap was not something that we started doing until we were probably, freshman year of high school, sophomore year of high school, and then you start branching out a little bit and learning some other techniques. But it's just this is today's game of football for you. That true I formation, true fullback doesn't exist. It's something that we talk about in my house all the time. My wife is a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan from the 90s, and she, talks about the lack of a fullback all the time. Like, where is that guy? That was such a part of what football was back then. Having that hard nosed guy that's going to get in the A gap and blow up a linebacker and, move the chains, right? Move 3 yards in 4 yards in a cloud of dust type action. It just doesn't exist. And it's sad for me. I can't stand it. How does an organization respond to overwhelming criticism towards an offensive coordinator? I don't know if they necessarily will. Venables doesn't necessarily strike me as somebody that's going to address ridicule that Levy is getting from social media or from the fans, and I can't imagine that they will sit down and watch film, tonight or tomorrow whenever they get it in and think, oh, that was a well called game. I mean, mistakes were made in that game. They'll be addressed and they go back to the drawing board. I don't think this is a fireable offense by any means. Slow start did catch up with you today. I was definitely blown away by the Dylan Gabriel. That first interception was just like, what are you doing? Like it was just so late. And even if when his it was late when his eyes, I mean, he's got the ball in his hands. When he turned to look out there, it was late already. And then so to see him rear his arm back, I mean, in that moment, I was like, what is going on here? I thought that was just a terrible play. But you give there's so much of this game is about emotion. You give Kansas hope. You give them, you give them 7 easy points. You give them a lead, and all of a sudden they start to believe. I mean, I've been on the field with great teams. I played against Oklahoma teams that were national championship caliber. I played against Vince Young and the Texas Longhorns back in the day. Like those teams have the ability to suck the life out of you, right? When they get going, and I've got, if you go back and look from 2000 to 2004, Oklahoma State, Texas, you'll notice that they were just tragic losses by us. Tragic, major leads, right? We had fourth quarter opportunities, but it just seemed like they could just gut punch you in a heartbeat. They were just so overwhelming, right? I think that this team has the ability to do that. That O and U on the side of the helmet can still do that to teams if you go out and start early, which typically Oklahoma does. They've scored over 100 points in the first quarter too. I think the opponent's teams have been like 23. This might have been the only slow start they've had this year, and it bit them in the butt because Kansas absolutely started to believe as soon as they had that pick six. It was like life got breathed into that whole team. The sidelines lit up, the fans lit up. I mean, that was definitely the beginning of the end for sure. 405 boy, bottom line, we haven't reached elite defense right now. No, I wouldn't say. I mean, you want to talk about top five defenses? I mean, they're not there. But national championships have been won in the last 20 years with a top 40 defense, right? I mean, I think Oklahoma's got one of the top 25 defenses in college football right now, which is good enough. 100%, which is good enough. Well, they weren't perfect tonight. Kansas made plays, there's no doubt about that. But I wouldn't look at that group and hold my head at any for any reason. I think that group is pretty darn good. Jason Porter, thoughts on Bedlam? Um, I think it was probably 10 years ago. One of those, I think 2013 Bedlam, one of those games where Gundy just laid a coaching egg. I have said this since then. I will never pick Oklahoma State to win a Bedlam game until Mike Gundy is not the coach. Like, I'm just not going to do it. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. I was in the airport in Houston talking to an OU fan, and I was like, he said, what do you think of Bedlam? And I was like, Gundy's the coach. You're going to lose. And he was like, and I said, you be honest with me. I'm talking to an OU fan, and I mean a guy that's got OU tattooed on his forearm, right? I said, be honest with me. How many of the last 10 Bedlam games should Oklahoma State have won? Right, 10 or 12 Bedlam games. He looked at me and said, probably 5. Correct. Like, they've had in 5 of those games, at least, there were opportunities for Oklahoma State to get it done with with a sideline presence that had some fortitude and toughness and fight, and that wasn't passive. And that just doesn't happen in this game for Oklahoma State. Every single year, it's the same BS from them. It's this narrative that he did this last week. Well, it's just another game. It is not just another game. And it frustrates me every single season because the Cowboy football team, those boys, they'll show up 100%, be ready to play, but they will not be backed by the sidelines. So I think that Oklahoma wins that game. I don't know what the score will be. It depends on the conditions, but losing this one, coming into Bedlam next week, the Sooners will be fired up, ready to go. We'll see what happens with Oklahoma State tonight. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be more of a spectacle than I anticipated early this season. So I'm happy about that. I think the Cowboys at least have a fighting chance based off of how they're represented on the field. Our special teams are definitely a problem. No trust and no clutch. Your thoughts? Yeah, it's bad. No trust in a kicker. It's a weird deal. Every once in a while, this will happen to you. You heard. I remember Mike Leach holding tryouts for kickers on campus. Like, every once in a while, you just get caught in the situation. Something that's, I would say, especially with the transfer portal being what it is, for a school like Oklahoma, this is easily addressed. I think they go get themselves a kicker next year and all will be right in the world. I don't think it'll be a problem that's going to linger outside of the season, but it is a problem this year. Joseph, as long as they use Ollie, they will win. Man, I think Ollie Gordon's incredible. I'm right there with you. But here's what I'm trying to say. Like, I want you to go back and look at the OU Texas game from 2 weeks. What did you see out there from the sidelines, on both sidelines? Those were two coaches that understood the assignment, right? Two coaches that understood that it was going to take more than just your average play calling, more than just your average game plan, more than just your average whatever you go into any game with to find a way to win that. And they rolled the dice several times. Both of those coaches did. That's what it takes to win games like Bedlam. That's what it takes to win games against your rivals, right? I know that Venables has got it in him. I don't believe that Gundy's got it in him. And I think he's proven it to us time after time. Yeah, Ronnie, I think you should probably pass the ball a couple of times in that final drive. It was it's tough and it is what it is, but at some point you got to just have trust in your quarterback to go out there and make a decision. And with Gabriel's ability to run the football, there's always that percentage chance that he doesn't see a receiver, pulls it and makes a play himself. So I would have left it up to my quarterback. I would have given Gabriel the opportunity. Yeah, it's been weird watching them on special teams this year. I don't get it, all right? But like I said, it's something that's relatively easily addressed here at the offseason. It's not going to help them moving forward. And I think the returner situation is not as bad as you would think, but it is the kicker and the punter situation is very odd considering I think we've seen some excellence out of that group in the last decade in Norman. Yeah, Jason Porter, hit the like button, people. I appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, if you get a chance, please hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out quite a bit. I love doing these things with you guys. It's great. I can't believe we've been on for 35 minutes already. I think this is probably my favorite part of the job. Is just that after game conversation. I think you guys bring so much. I think there's a lot of people in media today that don't have the respect for the fans like they should. I think that in 2023, there's no reason for me to get on here and read stats to you because you guys have all the stats. There's no reason for me to get on here and act like I'm like I have this immense like I played at a high level. There's some things that I will have experienced that a lot of you haven't, and I'm happy to share that with you. But I like the conversation as much as I like just talking to you. I think you guys have great questions and great comments. So I love these things. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, I would really appreciate it. Let's see. Kathy Bennett. I've been disappointed in Levy more than this game. Yeah, I mean it's been Levy's getting a tough go. What's my boy Blinken Riley got? Okay, run play percentage ASU 44% at SMU, 65% at Tulsa, 44% at Cincinnati, 44% at ISU, 51% at Texas, 50% UCF, 50% at Kansas. 73%. How much of this outlier was the weather and how much was being overly conservative? Blinken, I think a lot of that was just the weather. I think a ton of it was just the weather, and um, when you have a quarterback that can run, and I thought Walker got hot there in a minute. You want to try to feed him as much as possible. Um, I thought late they should have gone to the pass, especially after the turnover by Downs there. They should have probably thrown the ball a couple times in that drive to see what happens. But yeah, I think the conditions did. Like this is Kansas's happy place, right? Like it's amazing how much the playing field gets leveled in a situation like this. 30 degrees, wet, not a little bit wet, a lot of wet, right? Raining during the game. Kansas is very happy in playing football in the phone booth, right? They're very happy with just lining up in power formations. They got a little trickery in the backfield, make you look one way and do something the other way. And even some of that dialed down for Kansas as the rain started to fall a little bit more. Kansas was very happy with this condensed playbook. Levy is not. Oklahoma is not. Right. Like that is definitely not what they want to do. They want to stretch it out and make you run sideline to sideline. Well, that was taken from Jeff Levy there, midway through the first quarter. And then all of a sudden, he's in a position where he's got to rely on the guys on the field to just make plays with a relatively vanilla playbook. So, yeah, no, I definitely thought that was the conditions for sure. All right, we'll do maybe a couple more. I'll get on out of here. Why is Levy calling last year Texas game for this rare passing and all same runs? I mean, some of this is just dictated by what you feel comfortable your offensive line can do, and we kind of hit them a little earlier today. Um, it's they're inconsistent. Sometimes they block like champions, and sometimes they don't block at all. So he's calling plays, not necessarily knowing what kind of support he's going to get up front, which makes it hard as a play caller. So I'm not trying to make excuses for him because I thought there were some things he did tonight that were pretty inexcusable. Some of the trick plays and reverses and things like that, like just didn't make any sense at all. But it is difficult to call plays when your offensive line is, they're 50% or 60% success rate. I mean, I don't know what they graded out as a whole, but it can't be very good based off of some of the things I saw tonight. KC fan, you got to give Dylan a chance to win that game after the Downs pick. He's a Heisman candidate. Let him throw the ball. I think Dylan Gabriel has proven to us time after time that he's a gamer in those moments, even in this game. Right, that last touchdown that they scored, you got to give it up to the kid for getting out there making plays. I'm right there with you. I don't understand taking the ball away from him in that final drive, even with you just to give him some run pass options. Right, I mean he is as talented of a runner as we've got on the team at this point. Why take him out of the equation as a Heisman candidate and somebody that has proven to be as clutch as any player in college football? I think that was probably the biggest mistake made by Jeff Levy tonight. All right, well, Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you joining me for this YouTube live. I will be doing this for the remainder of the season. You guys are awesome. I love the support. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps us out quite a bit. And make sure you go to selloutcrowd.com. I've got a ton of colleagues that are doing a great job, including Bob Stoops, who has just blown me away with his podcast. So check out Coach Stoops' podcast. Continue to watch mine. Go back and watch that J.R. Conrad podcast from last week if you get a chance. We talked quite a bit about offensive line play and just kind of where it's at around the country. I think it was pretty informative, and JR is incredible. Former Sooner great. One of the first freshmen to ever start on the offensive line at Oklahoma. He was pretty awesome. So thank you guys so much. Once again, hit the like button, subscribe, all the things. I really appreciate it. And I will be live again tonight after the Oklahoma State game. So if you want to tune into that too, feel free. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.